So we had already seen basic introduction of APIs and what are the type of APIs. Uh, what are the basic components of an API? How do we call an API? So all those things we have already covered. Today we are discussing API authentication and authorization. So firstly, what is API authentication and authorization? What is the difference, right? So authentication is a process of verifying the identity of the user or the application, right? So it's something saying that that whenever you are logging to your system asks for your username and a password, right? So it is a way of authentication that you are the person with right credentials. Only your login is only allowed in the systems when you have a user with similar credentials created in the system in any application. Okay. There is one more part is of authorization. Now, not every user in the organization has the same, I should say, authority or it's the same privileges, right? So authorization is the step where we actually check whether the person who is asking for access or asking for the or trying to execute something on the system actually has the privilege to do it or not. Okay. So we have seen that even in many applications and many places we have different kind of user roles like administrator, normal user, supervisor, and so on. So similarly, whenever we are designing our API interface, we might say that certain users have certain privileges and certain users don't have certain privileges, right? So not everyone should be able to, say for example, do a write operation, but say everyone can do a read operation. So this particular part is checked in the API authorization. Okay. So why do these are important? One is obviously data security. You don't want people who are not authorized to access your data. Privacy is important. So uh, even if you want to see your own data, still you should be able to do it only when the system has to ensure that you are the person accessing your data, not anyone else. Uh, so if our API doesn't have these authentication and authorization, people can misuse it, right? People can simply means if even if I don't want to get any information from the API, I still can call the API and keep on calling the APIs just like that. Compliance, so data security and privacy today is a very huge compliance issue. Uh, there are many laws in place in every country which have strict regulations on these aspects, and we have to make sure that we are not breaching these laws. Otherwise, it can be a very big uh, financial, legal, social problem for us. And enhance security, right? So we can also reduce the risk of attacks. Basically, uh, today we have many scenarios where bots are there, automated programs are there, which can actually cause our systems to fail if we are not doing these basic checks. So again, we have got multiple ways to for authentication as well as authorization. So basic authentication is the first thing. So this is a simple HTTP based method of using a username and password in plain text. Credentials are base64 encoded and sent in the authorization header. This is vulnerable to security lists like eavesdropping and attacks. So people can read your whatever information you are sending over the network, and this can be a problem. Otherwise, this is simple. This was simply saying that you create a username and password of a user in your system, and then when someone accesses the API, he passes that username and password, and your system matches whatever it gets and allows the user to access. Something which has become very popular is the API key authentication, right? So here, what we do is instead of asking for username and password, right? What we do is we will say that okay, once we have created an account successfully on any system, there would be a special interface over there which will say that generate keys. So basically, some keys will be generated. So you are a user, you go to say whether API, whether application, you will log in there, create your account, and generate your key. And then whenever you are requesting for any information, you will have to pass that key, okay, along with your login information. So this becomes more secure, right? And again, not everyone has that key. That key is only available to someone who has the login to the portal, web or application portal. So there are less chances of it getting misused. A very popular method today is called OAuth 2, right? So this is an authorization framework. Okay. Uh, so here, what is happening is uh, now the problem of sharing your credentials like username and password, right? They are not very handy. There are many cases like we tend to forget our password so many times. We have already seen that sending username and password is not really a good way to authenticate. So now people came up with frameworks where you don't need to enter your username and password, right? So the very common example that you might have seen is where your application says that authenticate using Google or authenticate using some other uh, uh, service which is already there, right? So here we have got concepts like resource owner, client, authorization server, resource server, etc. So this is used for secure third-party app access with access tokens and revocation features, right? So here, basically, whenever you try to log in, it will say that, okay, log in with Google or something. And then your application will actually reach out to Google and then bring the authentication from that platform. Another thing is called TLS encryption. Basically, we use this in encrypting the communication between client and server, right? Uh, so here you actually generate server certificates and session keys for secure data exchange. Okay, so this is another thing where we can maintain more security. JSON web-based token or JWT are used to represent claims securely, signed with a secret key. JWTs contain user information like ID and permissions, widely used in REST APIs for stateless authentication. Okay, so this has become very popular for your REST APIs. And lastly is OpenID Connect. So basically, this is nothing but extending the OAuth 2. And here we have also added a identity layer, right? It's the same thing I was telling you, allows users to authenticate using providers like Google or Facebook. So this is where we can use Google, Facebook, etc. to authenticate our login. I think you would have already used it somewhere somehow. And so this is very common in web apps like single sign-on systems for user authentication. It is at times also known as single sign-on. Okay, so why it is known as single sign-on? Where because we are saying that say suppose you are using uh, Google as well as Facebook as well as any two applications together, right? So basically, you will log into one application, and on the other application, the login will automatically happen. So the other application will fetch your authentication from the first application. So basically, it reduces the overall workload and also ensures that we have a seamless integration. And finally, we are not sharing username and password with each other, right? So once you are using this kind of a method, so today you can log into Facebook using your Gmail ID, right? So you don't have to create your account on Facebook also and Gmail also, and then manage your password on Gmail also and Facebook also, and so on. So these are these methods. Okay. So in our program, we are not going to go very deep into this particular aspect because really going deeper into it is more about understanding how APIs are created. But yes, you will be, when you will be working in your organization, you will be working on scenarios where uh, you are going to integrate the APIs and you will use some kind of authentication method. But still, we are trying to cover some of the basic practices or best practices uh, whenever you are uh, deploying your applications or APIs, right? So some best practices of authentication and authorization are that configure multiple API keys, use different API keys with varying access levels. So you will find this thing that, say, for example, if I'm creating multiple users, and each user has got different privileges. So each user will have its own API key. Okay. The application logic will actually handle this authorization in the application logic itself, right? Uh, so implement OAuth 2, stateful versus stateless. Stateful is secure but requires session management. Stateless is scalable but needs secure tokens and encryption. Combine OAuth 2 and OIDC for SSO. Enable single sign-on for seamless access across apps. Secure exchange of user authentication and data. So these are some of the best practices. Now we will just try to understand the code flow for say OAuth 2, right? So this is a typical OAuth 2 code flow. What is happening? So you as a user log into your web app, right? So basically, as soon as you log in, authorization code request goes to your OAuth 2 tenant, right? Then this tenant, maybe this is say for example Google or something, they will ask you for login directly to the user. Okay, so you will basically enter your Gmail password, Gmail username and password, and then once you are authenticated, your authentication will be sent to your application, your app. Okay, so this will now use authorization code that has been sent and try to obtain the credentials from the auto tenant. So it will get the code and it will basically send the application credentials like ID, token, and access back to the mobile app, regular app. And then your regular web app can request for data with the access token from your API, and your API will respond to it. Okay. So this kind of flow is there whenever we are implementing authorization code and auth2. Basically, what we are doing is we are avoiding the entry of username and password. This auth0 tenant, right? So this auth0 tenant is a system in which you have the login information actually pre-built in, and basically using this OAuth2 tenant, you are able to authorize authentication and authorize without needing to maintain your separate login on your web app. Okay. So let me just read it out once from here. So user selects login within the application. Auth0 SDK redirects to the authorization server. Uh, Auth0 authorization server redirects user to login and authorization prompt. User authenticates using one of the configured login options and may see a consent prompt listing the permissions. So Auth20 will give it to the application. OAuth0 authorization server redirects a user back to the application with single user authorization code. Auth0 SDK sends the authorization code, application client ID, and application credentials such as client secret or private key JWT to Auth0 authorization server. Auth0 authorization server verifies the authorization code, applicant's ID, and applicant's credentials, and Auth0 authorization server responds with ID token and access token, and optionally a refresh token. Application can use the access token to call API to access the information without the user. API responds with the requested data. So this is the basic flow. We have seen the flow, and this is all about it. So some of the things that you can practice is that you can go to https openweathermap.org. You can create your account there, validate your details from the email, right? Log into the app using your account details. You will receive an email with the details of your API key. This takes around 3 to 4 hours for activation. So do the same before attempting your practice. So basically, this will be used in your practices if you have done not. So I think you have not done them, but once we will do them, then we will know it.